Talking about the biggest stories that matter to you the most. Breaking news, John Calipari is finalizing a 5-year deal to become the Arkansas Razorbacks' next head coach, covering college sports like no one else. The biggest guests in sports. We now welcome in Hall of Famer Jim Calhoun.
Such a pride I had, I came to connect.
The legend, Tim Tebow, joins us.
We'll run it back. I like it.
The legend, Herschel Walker. Welcome in, everybody. Sunday night edition, Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Torres. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody's having a great day. By the way, hope everybody had a happy Thanksgiving. Hope everybody got to relax, spend time with friends and family, all that good stuff. And boy, oh boy, hope you're not an Ohio State fan today. We got ourselves a loaded Sunday night into Monday show. Everybody come on in. Appreciate everybody's support. Appreciate everybody supporting this show, like I just said. But when I tell you we got a jam-packed show, we got ourselves a loaded show. We're going to open, obviously, the big story, Ohio State, Michigan. We actually did a quick reaction. It's on the podcast and YouTube feeds. But now I want to dive into it deeper. Another loss for Ohio State. Ryan Day, what can he do? Is he going to get fired? If he comes back, should he even come back? We're going to talk about really everything from all angles there. From there, we'll talk about some of the other craziness from Saturday. We'll get into this what is it? Flag planting controversy. Everybody's planting flags everywhere, which sounds a little weird. Not going to lie, but we'll discuss that. Is it good? Is it bad? Whatever. We will discuss some of the other big rivalry games. We will discuss some of the college football coaching carousel updates as West Virginia, UCF, Purdue are now available. And also we will wrap by just talking about what is the actual college football playoff picture. The regular season is done. Conference championships start this week. And I think 11 of 12 spots are actually basically spoken for in the college football playoff rankings. And so we will talk about that and who can get in after this week's conference championship games. Before we get started, a couple quick reminders. First of all, make sure that you are subscribed to the Aaron Torres Pod and Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel, podcast, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. We do appreciate your support. Also, if you want to do your boy Torres a solid, leave a 5-star rating and review. Leave a nice review. Say nice things about the show on our Apple page. We really would appreciate that. And of course, the YouTube channel is humming. We are closing in on 47,000 subscribers. Cannot believe how much you guys react to this show. I appreciate everybody's support there. So make sure you're subscribed on YouTube. New clips, new videos going up every single day as we are closing in, I cannot believe, on 50,000 subscribers. Also, before we get started, do want to thank one of our favorite partners, one of our favorite sponsors. Yeah, I'm talking about Cauli Puffs. Okay, so listen, it's football season. The holidays are both behind us, but again, also in front of us. We got Christmas coming up. You're spending a lot of time on the couch. You're snacking. You're watching football, and you're sitting there saying, I just ate a ton for Thanksgiving, but I want to watch football. I need something to snack on. I need something healthy, but also something that is delicious as well. Well, that's where Cauli Puffs comes in. I've said it before. I've told you all about it. This is the new age snack food in your grocery aisle. Healthy, delicious, all the other crap that's fried, that's whatever, that ain't Cauli Puffs, okay? Cauli Puffs, baked, not fried. They use avocado oil, no grease to make them. But here is the crazy part. They taste delicious. Don't take my word for it. You can find out more. Try them for yourself one of two ways. Go to caulipuffs.com. Put in your first order there. You're going to love them. I can promise you that. But also, Amazon.com, and it is worth noting, for about 12 more hours, you can get a Black Friday discount at Amazon.com. All you got to do is go to Amazon.com. All you got to do is search Cauli Puffs. Once you're there, you don't need to put in any promo code, any discount code, anything. Just throw them in your cart and you automatically get 25% off. That is through December 2nd, which is obviously this coming Monday. So make sure to take advantage. Try them for yourself. Don't take my word for them. You're going to love Cauli Puffs. Tell them Torres sent you. Cauli Puffs, we really appreciate your support. With that said, we are coming off an insane rivalry weekend. So there is no more time to waste. Let's get into it, and let's get to the topic of the day, okay? And the topic of the day, listen, there is no other place to start other than Columbus, Ohio, Michigan, Ohio State, and just the stunner of all stunners. Listen, I was talking to a friend about this on Sunday. I think you can argue, given the two teams, given what Ohio State invested into its roster and its coaching staff this offseason, and given what Michigan had looked like through 11 games this season, I think you could argue this is one of the most stunning upsets we have ever seen in college football history. Don't give me Stanford, they were a 39-point underdog. Stanford stunk, USC didn't show up, whatever. Michigan, Ohio State, a 20.5-point favorite at home on a 3-game losing streak. There was just no way they could lose this game. Only they do. 13-10 is the final score. And we absolutely have to talk about this game. Now, if you missed it, we did a bit of an emergency reaction immediately following the game. By the way, we had some technical difficulties. I was so annoyed. But I bring it up to solely say this, is that at the end of the day, we did a quick reaction on Sunday. So this isn't going to be so much about, hey, on third down early in the fourth quarter, this happened, or on second down here. But I do just want to go in and talk about this because I was thinking about this. I have been as big of a critic of Ryan Day as anybody in the media, okay? And at the end of the day, as critical as I've been of him, even I could not see this coming. I thought this game could be close because I know Ohio State's offensive line is beat up. They were going up against a very good Michigan defensive front. But at the same time, there was just no scenario in which I actually saw them losing. I think I said on the college football betting pod, I said, look, I could see this being a 20-6 type game, a 20-3 type game. I did not see Michigan in any way, shape, or form winning this game outright. Only that's exactly what happened. Now, listen, when I think about the big picture of this game, and we're going to get to Ryan Day's future here in half a second, but when I think about the big picture of this game, a couple things stand out. First of all, it was a system-wide failure. Again, we don't need to go through the who, what, when, where, why. We talked about all that. The game is now about 36 hours old. By the time some of you listen to this on Monday, it'll be 48 hours old, okay? But at the same time, just think about everything that had to go wrong for Ohio State to lose this game. 2 missed field goals, 2 Will Howard interceptions. Oh, by the way, on top of that, Ryan Day in what was one of the most colossal mistakes any coaching staff could make. Ohio State had to take a timeout out of the 2-minute timeout in the fourth quarter. It cost them 45 seconds that they could have been driving the length of the field. So this was a system-wide failure. It starts at the top with Ryan Day, goes all the way down to the last player on this roster. But when I look at the big picture of this game, when I look at who deserves the most blame, it falls on two people specifically. The first one, it is your highly paid offensive coordinator, Chip Kelly, okay? And so part of the reason that I picked Ohio State to win, but my actual best bet was the under of 43.5. Again, I thought it was going to be like a 21-6, 20-6, 17-3 type game, was because, in my opinion, what I thought was going to happen was pretty straightforward. Ohio State would try to run the ball, try to have some balance, and then at some point they would just realize, you know what, we can't really run the ball against this team. So we're just going to take the ball and we're going to throw it to one of our 37 future NFL wide receivers. They have no matchup for Jeremiah Smith. They have no matchup for Carnell Tate. Their defensive backfield was their weakness coming into the game. And then their All-American quarterback, Will Johnson, did not play. And so it doesn't take rocket science. Bottom line is, when a fan on the couch can sit there and say, look, this is what you have to do. Throw the freaking football. When Joel Klatt, who I thought, listen, I know he gets a lot of heat from everyone. I thought Joel Klatt was very critical of Ohio State in their game plan, and I think he was 100% right. It's not rocket science. You don't have to be Vince Lombardi. You don't have to be a $2 million a year coordinator to know that you have great wide receivers. Their defensive backfield isn't good. Throw the freaking football. And what was crazy about it was there was a 2 or so drive stretch where Ohio State figured that out. It was right before the half, And all of a sudden, Ohio State, they just started chucking the ball all over the place. And it was big gain after big gain after big gain. Cardell Tate, Jeremiah Smith. And I remember thinking right before half, I'm like, well, this game's over. They just stopped getting cute with the run game and decided that instead they're just going to pass the football. And they scored a touchdown right before the half. And then they come out. They immediately, I don't remember if it was exactly a 3-and-out, but they give the ball back pretty quickly. And all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, they're really trying to run the football and prove that they're a tougher team or whatever. As a matter of fact, producer Matt, pop up the tweet that I put out on Saturday afternoon. I can't believe how viral this tweet went, but it is just, listen, I played not at the college level, not in the pros, but if me on the couch can see that all you're trying to do is run the ball for the sake of running the ball, I don't know what to tell you other than that it's a bad game plan. This is what I tweeted out. I said, Ryan Day is about to get himself fired because he and Chip Kelly would rather try to prove they're the tougher team than Michigan in the trenches as opposed to just throwing the ball to one of their 237 NFL wide receivers. What a world. That basically sums it up. And I'm not saying I'm a genius, and I'm not saying I know more than Ryan Day, and I'm not saying I know more than Chip Kelly, but it wasn't rocket science. Just throw the freaking football. And the crazy part is, if you look at the final stats of this game, Ohio State finished, how about this, 77 yards rushing on 20-something carries. I think it was 23 carries is what it ended up being. Let me see if I could pull up the stats really quick here while I have you all right now. Ohio State finished with 77 carries on 26 rushes. That's 3 yards per carry. Michigan, by the way, remember, Michigan basically has no quarterback to speak of. And in this game, Michigan was still able to run for 173 yards on 41 carries, 4.2 yards per carry. What a disaster. Secondly, outside of Chip Kelly, it goes without saying, this falls on Ryan Day. And we're going to get into Ryan Day's future in just a second. But listen, I actually don't think, as much as I'm critical of Ryan Day, I don't think that he is a terrible football coach. Okay. Like there have been very terrible coaches that have gotten very good jobs. I don't think Ryan Day is one of them. We know what the overall record is. We know what he has done against basically everybody other than Michigan and the truly elite of college football. By the way, I heard this stat the other day and I had completely forgotten about it. You know that Ryan Day, I think it's year 6 for him. His only loss in the Big Ten other than to Michigan was this year against Oregon. So take out the Michigan games. He's like 62-1 in the Big Ten or something crazy like that. But it doesn't matter because, as I always say, when you're the Ohio State coach, it doesn't matter what your overall record is. It doesn't matter if you're winning, what your winning percentage is. Your entire job comes down to 3 things. Do you beat Michigan? Do you compete for Big Ten championships? Do you win Big Ten championships, and do you win and compete for national championships? Everybody criticizes all these fans. Ohio State fans are reasonable. You expect to be in the title conversation every year, but they know you can't win it every year. But you should beat Michigan and you should beat Ohio, or you should win the Big Ten, especially given the resources that Ryan Day has. And I think this is a perfect metaphor. This season is a perfect metaphor for everything that has gone wrong. Right? Think about the 2 biggest games of the year for Ohio State this season. Think about the fact that in the 2 biggest games, the first one, Oregon, how did you lose that game? Yes, there was a questionable offensive PI on Jeremiah Smith. I'm sorry, I think it was actually the right call. But why you lost was because Will Howard, in the final seconds, could not get down before a final play could be run or before you could kick a field goal or whatever against Oregon. And then you go into this game, as I said, 2 missed field goals, 2 interceptions, the 2-minute timeout. You have to take a timeout after you went to commercial break. That's the Ryan Day experience. You beat Northwestern, you beat Michigan State, you do what you have to do against all these lousy teams, but in the big games, in the big moments, you're always coming up short. And at a certain point, it's not just coincidence. It is the fact that there is a Michigan problem with Ohio State, and there is a Ryan Day problem in these big games. And so what I want to do now, I want to turn our attention to Ryan Day's future. After the game, talked about it, talked about his future, talked about his whatever. And by the way, should mention, as you can see on the screen, we do have a team-specific page, Torres on Ohio State. Torres on Ohio State. We've had wall-to-wall coverage the last 24 hours, really all season long, but especially the last 24 hours after this debacle, okay? But why I bring it up is to say this. I want to talk about Ryan Day's future. It's all anybody in college football is talking about. And I spent a ton of time on the phones with people all over the sport of college football, people who cover the Big Ten, people who cover Ohio State, people who are close to the program, people who are close to the boosters. And I think this is as fascinating of a situation as you could possibly have, because I don't think it's super obvious that you fire him, even if I think you probably should because of money concerns. But I also think what happens, there are so many variables. So let's just dive into what is Ryan Day's future? How possible is it he gets fired? Or how possible is it he just isn't back at Ohio State next year? Now, where it gets complicated for Ryan Day, there's a couple things that make this thing darn complicated, okay? One, he's got a $37 million buyout, okay? And so listen, I know it's Ohio State. I know all these buyouts have weird offset language. You're probably not going to have to write a check for $37 million to get rid of him. But even at Ohio State, it is a lot of money to spend, especially after you just asked your boosters to spend $20 million on the actual roster. Like, it doesn't matter if you're Ohio State or whatever. Even at a certain point, you're going to run out of money and not have $37 million just lying around ready to fire a guy. You have the variable of he does win a lot of games, even if it's not the ones that matter. I think what's also been interesting, and I can see both sides of this, is the reality that of the college football playoff calendar now, okay? Ohio State, and we're going to talk about the playoff picture here in just a minute, but Ohio State right now, we all understand is going to make the playoff. We can make fun of how it happened, what happened against Michigan, whatever. It doesn't change the fact that Ohio State is going to make the college football playoff. And so even if they lose in the first round, you're now talking about late December before you would actually make a move, if you make a move and spend the $37 million to get rid of him. Okay. You're not going to fire him before the playoff. I'm sorry. It's the truth. You're just not. And that's assuming you lose in the first round. If you don't lose, now all of a sudden you're looking at New Year's Day. Now, listen, what I would also say is a couple of things. I think this is important as well, is that one, Ohio State's probably always going to be in the playoffs. So I saw a lot of that from Ohio State fans. Well, you can't fire him because, you're going to have to wait till mid-December. It's like, well, you're going to have to wait every year until mid-December. Ryan Day, to his credit, is never going 7-5 at Ohio State. Might go 10-2, might miss a Big Ten championship game for a fifth straight year next year. But it's never going to be a scenario where he's not playing in the playoff, which means you're always going to have to make a move in mid-December. I think it's also worth noting, Alabama didn't make its coaching change until mid-January of last year. They still ended up with a pretty good coach. And so when you're one of these truly elite programs, to me, I don't really care. Go out. If he's not the right guy, make the change. Do what you have to do. No excuses. But then what's also interesting about this particular situation is Ohio State is going to make the playoff. And the crazy part is, like, you look at the FanDuel odds, you look at the whatever odds, they're still one of the favorites to win the whole thing. I don't think they're going to, because I don't trust Will Howard. I don't trust Ryan Day in big games. But, like, there's a scenario, like, say they're the 8th seed. Then all of a sudden they're hosting whoever in the first round. Maybe they're hosting Indiana. And then you get to the semifinals. Now you're playing on a neutral field against whoever. It's like, the point I'm trying to make is this is not obvious that Ohio State can't make a real run in the playoff, even if the regular season has been disappointing. So that complicates everything, the money and the timing. But what also is indisputable is this. If you're Ryan Day, whether you get fired or not, this is the part I don't think enough people are talking about. Whether you get fired or not, I will be honest. If I was Ryan Day, I would actually start looking for some other options. And let me go ahead and explain why. Because at the end of the day, when I was thinking about Ryan Day, I was thinking about his exact situation at Ohio State right now, okay? And what I was thinking about is this. If Ryan Day, let's just say you don't make a deep run in the college football playoff. Let's say you maybe win a game and then you lose in that quarterfinal round right around New Year's Day, okay? Well, what are the next 11 months for you if you're Ryan Day? The next 11 months are pretty miserable, right? Because the next 11 months, they all really boil down to beating Michigan. Like, if you win games next year, nobody's going to care. Nobody's going to pat you on the back again for beating Northwestern, for beating Michigan State, for beating USC. Now, don't get me wrong, they'll criticize you if you lose anything before Michigan, but you ain't going to get credit for pretty much anything. But I was thinking about this. Even if Ryan Day beat Michigan next year, Does that make Ohio State fans like all of a sudden forget what happened the last 4 years? Like are Ohio State fans going to be like, that's been our guy all along. Love that guy. Always knew he had it in him. No, most Ohio State fans, and this is not a criticism of you Ohio State fans, you'd be like, what took so long? We've been waiting since 2019 for this moment. What? And that's if you win. And remember, you just played the worst Michigan team you're ever going to play, and you did not win at home. And so if I'm Ryan Day, I'll be honest, and there's been rumors over the last couple of weeks that some representatives of his have kind of poked around, see what's available. I'll be transparent. I don't know if he's getting fired, but if I was him, I sure as hell would think about, is it possible at all for me to find another opportunity somewhere else? Now, I don't think he's getting an NFL head coaching job. I don't know if, coordinator is probably a little beneath him as the Ohio State head coach. But you know what this scenario reminds me of? And I'm not the first person to say this over the last couple of days. It reminds me of Calipari at Kentucky last year. After Calipari lost in the NCAA tournament, it was just like, you can't come back, man. Your life is going to be so awful if you come back. And Calipari found his escape plan. And I think Ryan Day's got to look for his. Transparently, if I was Ryan Day, you know what I would actually do? I would get on the phone with one school that actually opened up this weekend. And you're going to laugh. And at first it's going to sound crazy. You can say, there's no way the Ohio State coach would do this. You know what I would do if I was Ryan Day? I'd give UCF, Central Florida, a call. It sounds crazy. It sounds like Torres is just throwing crap against the wall. And to a degree, I am. I don't know. I've spent time around Ryan Day in press settings, but I've never spent time with him one-on-one. I don't know what motivates him. But what I do know is his life's pretty miserable as the Ohio State coach. It's not getting any better short of a national championship in the next year. And it could only get worse if you somehow lose to Michigan again. And so what I would do if I was him, I'd call up Central Florida and I'd say, hey, listen, I got this playoff game on December 19th, December 20th. Hold that opening. And if so, I'll take it. And let me explain why. It's a power conference school. You have access to the college football playoff, okay? You're going to get in if you win the Big 12 at UCF. You have recruiting advantages that basically nobody in that conference has. And transparently, I don't think he's a bad coach. Like I'm critical of Ryan Day, but I don't think he's terrible. I just think that he isn't the right coach for Ohio State. I think that he doesn't have the temperament. I think it's in his head. I'm not saying he'll never beat Michigan, but I do think it's in his head, especially in big games, especially against Michigan. And so if I'm him, what I'm doing, I'm calling up Central Florida and saying, hold that spot. I'll take it, because you can still compete for everything at Central Florida in a much more stress-free environment. Your kids can go to school without getting harassed. And I don't know all of the details, but Ryan Day referenced in his post-game press conference on Saturday, this has been tougher on my family than it's been on me. I'm a critic of Ryan Day. I feel bad for his kids though. They didn't sign up to get, be the coach, be the son or daughter of the guy who can't beat Michigan living in Columbus. That can't be fun. And so I just bring it up, go to Orlando, get a fresh start. There's NBA teams there. Like, it's not Columbus, Ohio. And then from there, we could talk about who else would potentially be an Ohio State candidate. By the way, I did a candidates video on Sunday morning you should check out. But if I'm Ryan Day, I don't know if he's getting fired. What I do know, I'd be looking for an escape plan, because this thing is ugly. All right. So what we're going to do, take a quick break, come back. Producer Matt, if we have any good questions or thoughts on Ryan Day, I'll be happy to take a look at them right now. But when we come back, we're going to continue the Ohio State-Michigan conversation with, how about the flag planting after the game? What about that? It became an epidemic on Saturday in college football. I got some thoughts on the flag planting epidemic. We'll take a quick break. Be right back. Before we do, many of you ask me all the time, Torres, what can I do to help support the show? You give me hours and hours and hours of content every single week. What can I do to help you? Well, I'll tell you what, do me a quick favor. Check out the Aaron Torres Media merchandise store for all of your team-specific shirts, hats, and more. All available at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. A lot of you wondering, Torres, what can I get in that merch store? Well, first of all, we got our brand new Hope and Pope Kentucky basketball t-shirts. That's right. Mark Pope has arrived. He is here to save the day. Get your Hope and Pope t-shirts there. Also, Arkansas fans, the Big Pig Invasion is here. You can get your tees there. basketball school Alabama shirts, Mora Hurley 2024 UConn shirts for your tailgates at Rentschler Field, your games at the XL Center or Gamble. And oh, by the way, your Mike effing Woodson gear for Indiana. If you love football, we got you covered too. We got more Dion shirts and hats than we even know what to do with. The freeze warning has hit the plains. Auburn fans, grab your freeze warning tees now. And of course, our new era, new rules shirt applies to Nebraska football and its incredible fan base. We have more coming for the fall, plenty in stock right now. So make sure to check out the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. And you can always hit me up with any questions. Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. So, producer Matt, before we move on, a couple quick questions and comments on Ryan Day and his future. Go ahead and pull them up. Paul says, Ryan Day is an evil genius. He doesn't have to play Oregon again and still gets a home game in Columbus, recruiting and money, and Aaron wants him replaced. Evil genius. Yeah. So a couple things on that. I think genius doesn't look like it's necessarily spelled right, but that's neither here nor there. Maybe my spelling is not correct. Listen, first of all, I don't think they're getting a home playoff game. I think the SEC champ, the Big Ten champ, or the SEC runner-up, the Big Ten runner-up, I think Notre Dame would be ahead of them. And I think Tennessee is probably ahead of them as well. All the projections I saw today saw them potentially going to Tennessee. So, listen, it's hard to know what the committee is going to do, and we're going to talk about that. But yeah, I don't know if it's evil genius to lose to Michigan and have your poor kids harassed at school because you lost to them for a fourth straight game. Go ahead and pop the next one, producer Matt. Let's see here. All right. So the next one. The Ohio State coaching staff doesn't realize that the forward pass in college football has been legal since 1906. Oh, man. It's that kind of time to be an Ohio State fan. I mean, listen, that was an embarrassing game plan. And listen, one thing, and you all have listened to this show long enough, I don't like to be criticized scheme and coaching decisions guy. Like Ryan Day knows more about football than me. I'm not saying that I do or that I know more than Chip Kelly. What I am saying, though, is that there was such an obvious mismatch. Like sometimes it's really as simple as, what do you think that the other team wants you to do? And if you had gotten in Sharon Moore's headset, I guarantee you that whole Michigan staff was like, I can't believe how much they're running the football. This is great. They're running right into the strength of our defense. So yeah, the Ohio State staff maybe not realizing that the forward pass is in college football has been legal since 1906. What is that, 118 years? Somebody needs to let Chip Kelly know about that rule change because, my goodness, what a debacle that was. Dave says, Michigan's best. This is a great point. I might have mentioned it. If I didn't, I apologize. Dave just brought up a great point. Michigan's best players on offense and on defense. Colston Loveland is their tight end, okay? Joel Klatt had the stat. I think it was like 51% of all passing targets have gone to Colston Loveland. Like, he's the only guy that has been able to create any kind of offense in the passing game, was not available. Will Johnson, an All-American corner, not available. That's another reason. Just throw the freaking football. They had no answer for Jeremiah Smith. That kid is a freak of all freaks. I'd love to say I can't wait to keep watching him in college football, but if Ohio State's going to waste his talent like that, I'm sorry, I'm not that excited. That kid is an unbelievable talent. And I hope whoever's the next quarterback at Ohio State, they take better advantage. Real quick, because I want to get some other stuff here. If Ohio State loses in the first round, Ryan Day has to go. Big game. I actually agree with that 100%. You cannot, because remember, this isn't just Ohio State's good. This is Ohio State spent $20 million on a roster. And that's not rumor. That's not innuendo. That's not Torres making stuff up. That's coming from the athletic department. Like Ross Bjork, the AD, has done interviews on the record talking about them spending $20 million on this roster. And so it's not just that you have, a loss to Michigan. It's that you lost the two biggest games on your schedule. You lost your biggest rival and the best team you played, and you have a $20 million roster. Like, come on. You have got to be better than this. And yes, if you lose in the first round, I think he's got to go. I cannot see the scenario where he's coming back if you don't beat Michigan for a fourth straight year with the worst Michigan team that you are going to see. And then on top of that, there is also the fact that you have the $20 million roster and the fact that you lost in the first round of the playoff. If you make the semifinals or the final and you lose to a Texas or an Oregon, it's one thing. But if you can't get out of the first round of a 12-team playoff and none of your goals were accomplished, no Michigan, no Big Ten championship, no national championship, I think you got to go. All right, really quickly, I do want to talk about some of the other stuff that happened this weekend. I think what we'll do over the next probably 20, 25 minutes is kind of bounce around really quick. And where I want to start is with the newest trend that is sweeping all of college football that I didn't know was a trend until Saturday. Yeah, it's losing at home, watching your rivals plant their flag on your field, and starting a freaking brawl. Okay, so listen, we saw it all throughout the day on Saturday. It obviously started at Michigan, Ohio State in Columbus. Producer Matt, you can just start popping up the tweets and the pictures and the videos and whatever else. But like, it was an epidemic over the course of college football on Saturday. So it started at Michigan, Ohio State. As you can see there, after Florida and Florida State played, Florida went ahead and planted their flag. Florida State was not happy about it. Oh, by the way, UNC does not like when NC State plants their flag at the game in Chapel Hill. And so you can see it there. I have so many different thoughts, and let's just dive into this. By the way, as we were coming on air, the Big Ten did reprimand and fine Michigan and Ohio State for their flag planting situation. But it was crazy, right? Because there was three or four situations where a team planted the flag, a brawl breaks out, and we don't even know what the heck is going on. Okay, so first of all, let's start with the Michigan-Ohio State thing. One, we all saw all the videos and all the pictures of Ryan Day just basically standing there in disbelief. I actually, in some ways, felt bad for Ryan Day. I think he was in such disbelief about basically what had happened in that game. There is a brawl going on 10 feet away from him, and he has absolutely no idea what's going on. There's a video of him. You can see him kind of mouthing, what just happened or what's going on or whatever. So I kind of felt bad for him. By the way, Joel and Gus, I think, do an excellent job. This is not a terrible criticism of them, but I did think they overreacted a little bit. But when I see all of the all of the flag planting, I think I've already messed that up about 7 or 8 times throughout the show. When I see all the flag planting that went on in college football and the brawls that ensued after that, I had one thought, and I know it's going to be pretty unpopular. You know what the number one, because this became a thing, right? It became, how do we make sure this doesn't happen again? Well, there's actually a very easy way to make sure that a visiting team doesn't plant the flag at midfield on your field. I have a crazy idea. I don't know if it's going to even make total sense, but here is the solution to visiting teams planting the flag at midfield on your rival, after a big win. How about this? Crazy, I know. Don't freaking lose to them. How about that? How about, like to me, and I tweeted this out. It's like my grand solution to rivalry week flag plantings is, don't get your butt kicked at home by your biggest rival, okay? And so I tweeted it out on Saturday night. It was after the Florida State thing, which happened after Michigan, Ohio State, which happened after North Carolina, UNC, et cetera, or NC State, UNC, et cetera. And what I basically said was pretty straightforward. I said, look, we have to have a new rule in college football. You are not allowed to complain about flags being planted at midfield if you get your butt kicked at home by your biggest rival. By the way, you know what the worst part about all this is? And it's a very obvious take, but it's the truth. The real obvious take, and that's the truth, is pretty straightforward, is that some of those teams showed more heart in trying to start a brawl with their rivals after a loss than they did at any point during the game, okay? I mean, think about Ohio State. Ohio State, listen, for 4 years, you've been getting your butt kicked by Michigan every single year. If you're a senior, this was the second time that Michigan has come into your place, kicked your butt, and beat you. By the way, at Ohio State specifically, remember, they had a bunch of guys that could have gone pro last year. They all came back basically because they were tired of losing to Michigan. They wanted to compete for a Big Ten championship. They want to win a national championship, all that good stuff. Denzel Burke, cornerback, Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau, Emeka Ibuka, all those guys came back for this one game to beat Michigan and to celebrate in front of their home fans. And what do? They got their butt kicked on the field. And then when Michigan planted their flag, what ended up happening? They started a fight. It's like, where was some of that fight during the game? By the way, you know what I noticed during the Ohio State-Michigan game, which we didn't even talk about? The two guys that seemed most fired up when good things happen, Quinshon Judkins, transfer from Ole Miss, and Jeremiah Smith, freshman wide receiver. Neither of them were there last year. And so you think about Ohio State, you get your butt kicked. Two guys that weren't even there seem to care more than anybody. And now after the game, you want to start a fight? Now, to the credit of Jack Sawyer, I did see the video of him kind of, being held back, saying they're not planting the flag on my effing field, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, Jack Sawyer, I know you had the biggest play for Ohio State in the game, but maybe some of your other teammates can step up. Maybe it's not Michigan's fault that you guys didn't come in ready to play. By the way, it's the same with Florida State. Like, the Florida State thing was hysterical to me. Florida State all of a sudden is all bent out of shape because Florida planted their flag at midfield in Doak Campbell Stadium. Florida State, which basically quit in week 2 of the season. We all watched week 1, or we watched week 0 against Georgia Tech in Dublin. Then you come home, you play Labor Day night against Boston College. And from there, you basically quit. You stopped trying. You finished 2-10. It was probably the worst season in the history of Florida State football. The entire coaching staff has been fired. And now this is where you draw the line. This is where it's too much. Here's a crazy idea. How about you showed some of that heart against Miami? You could have beat them because Miami kind of was a little bit overrated this year. Maybe you could have beaten Clemson if you showed some of that heart. Maybe you could have literally beaten anyone other than Cal and Charleston Southern if you actually showed up ready to play and ready to compete and ready to fight the way that you did when that flag planting happened. By the way, these are some of the teams that Florida State has lost to this year. They lost to Duke. They lost to UNC, which just fired their coach. They lost to Boston College. They lost to Memphis. Now, they lost to some good teams. SMU and Clemson are playing for the ACC title. Miami is obviously finished 10-2. Notre Dame is going to the college football playoff. But here's an idea, Florida State. How about you just fight on the field and you show up ready to play? Then you don't have to worry about people planting your flags. So that's Torres' big take on flag planting. That's my big theory. If you don't want the opposing fan, if you don't want rivals to do it, just how about you beat them and then you don't got to worry about it. All right. So let's keep going. Let's keep going with the rest of rivalry week. And I'll be honest, I think the big picture results that kind of result in a college football playoff to me are probably a little bit more interesting than anything, I guess the point that I'm trying to make. I don't think we need to spend 15 minutes breaking down Alabama-Auburn. There's a lot of great Auburn pods, a lot of great Alabama pods. I think you guys want to talk about what does it all mean for the college football playoff picture. But just a couple quick thoughts on a couple of these games. First of all, the Iron Bowl. Listen, I actually do give a little bit of credit to Alabama. If I am going to be critical of Kalen DeBoer every time they lose a game, the team doesn't show up ready to play, whatever, then I got to give credit because I thought they were going to roll over and play dead in this game. I thought after they lost to Oklahoma, I don't care if it's a rivalry game, this team doesn't show up for anything pretty much other than Georgia all season long. So I got to give credit where it's due. Alabama wins 28-14 in this game. And how they won, it's no real secret, right? It's no real secret that what did we talk about on the preview show? Jalen Milroe. If you can stop him from running the football, you're going to have a pretty good chance to beat Alabama. If you can't stop Jalen Milroe from running the football, then you're probably not going to beat Alabama. Well, guess what ended up happening in this game? Jalen Milroe rushed for 104 yards on 17 carries. Listen, that's not, his best performance, but 6 yards per carry, 3 touchdowns. Yeah, that's how you're going to lose when you have a top 20 defense. For Auburn, listen, I thought they would show up a little bit ready to play, a little bit more ready to play. Instead, they put up 14 points. Peyton Thorne, an interception late. I saw producer Matt, who runs our Torres on Auburn account, tweet out that Peyton Thorne's final pass as an Auburn Tiger being an interception. It is perfectly symbolic for his entire career. So Alabama wins. We're going to talk about Alabama in the playoff picture in just one moment, but they are still very much alive because of some of the other results from Saturday. Really quickly, I wish the Texas A&M game lived up to, I wish the game itself was as good as the hype leading up to it. Kind of not the best watch, right? Texas beats Texas A&M 17-7. Obviously, late in the game, Texas A&M had a fourth down opportunity that would have cut it to 17-10. They do not get it. Texas holds out for the victory. Obviously, with the win one, Texas is going to the SEC championship game. Just my big picture takeaways. One, thought it was interesting. Arch Manning getting a rushing touchdown in this game. He was basically like their Tim Tebow. Remember Tim Tebow his freshman year at Florida, and I know he was a true freshman. Arch is a redshirt freshman, but Tim Tebow used to be kind of this battering ram on the goal line. Well, Arch Manning comes in and rushes for a touchdown. Speaking of rushing, I think Texas, two things stand out. They are running the ball really well. We talked about them against Kentucky last week, and they basically just ran it down Kentucky's throat. Quinn Ewers barely had to throw the ball. Very much the same in this game as they finished with 243 yards rushing, 47 rush attempts. That's 5 yards per carry. Listen, Texas A&M was a team that at their best was shoving the ball down your throat. Last couple games, they kind of got the ball shoved down their own throats as Texas A&M loses this one. Texas obviously going to the SEC championship game. Listen, we'll see. We'll preview that game in a minute. We'll talk about this. I think it unofficially clinches a college football playoff appearance for Texas. We'll talk about that momentarily. From the Texas A&M side of things, I'll be honest. I think that it's kind of interesting to talk about them as a team right now, because when you look at Texas A&M, remember, they entered November. This was a different era under Mike Elko, their final game of October. That was the dominant win over LSU, 38-23 at home. That was the game, if you remember, they outscored LSU 31-6 in the second half. They ran the ball down LSU's throat, 242 yards of rush offense. And you felt like, oh my goodness, Texas A&M is coming. Texas A&M is going to be in the playoff conversation. And they really were, because obviously if they had won this game, they would have gone to the SEC championship game and played for their first ever SEC title. But they lose the game. And I'll be honest, I was texting with our Torres on Texas A&M guy, and like transparently, he was mad. And I think he brought up an interesting point. I think most people nationally would sit there and say, year one for Mike Elko was this wild success story. And he brought up an interesting point. He said, listen, we entered November at 7-1. We lost our final 3 SEC games. We went 8-4. That was basically the ceiling under Jimbo Fisher. And 8-4 in year one is generally good, but it was the same Texas A&M all over again. Had real opportunities, real chances, fell apart down the stretch, lost to our rivals at home. And I thought he brought up a couple interesting points. The offense never really got figured out over the course of the year. I know there were injuries at the quarterback spot, whatever, but the offense wasn't very good. The defense, obviously, a lot of talent, but you look at the final 3 weeks of the regular season, they didn't give up very many points to Texas, but they gave up almost 500 yards of total offense to Texas, gave up 43 to Auburn in 4 overtimes a few weeks ago, gave up 44 to South Carolina. And he was like, I don't really think it was successful because we're never going to have better defensive talent than we did this year, and we're never going to have a better schedule than we did this year. Notre Dame at home, Texas at home, LSU at home, no Bama, no Georgia, no Tennessee, no Oklahoma. And he basically said, I think it's kind of a disappointment. By the way, if you play Florida at later in the year as opposed to earlier in the year, that's probably a loss. So I thought that was kind of an interesting perspective on Texas A&M, but they lose this game. They fall to 8-4. I thought it was funny. One of their players after the game kind of referenced in passing, like, I told our guys before the game, it's either the SEC championship or the Music City Bowl, and nobody wants to play in the Music City Bowl. So I was like, damn, Music City Bowl just out here taking strays here on a Saturday night, but Texas A&M loses that game. The ACC, we'll talk about these two results, but Miami loses to Syracuse. That's obviously not a rivalry matchup, but Miami is out of the ACC championship game with that loss. Clemson loses to South Carolina. Clemson backdoors their way to the ACC championship game, But now I don't see a scenario where they get into the playoff unless they win the ACC. Really quickly, we're going to talk playoff in just a minute. Before we do, though, we actually finally got a tiny bit of traction on the college football coaching carousel, okay? So for all season, we had no jobs open at all at the power conference level. Then on Tuesday, when I was going out to Vegas, Mac Brown is fired. We didn't really get a chance to talk about Carolina strictly because of the fact that, truth be told is that there was a lot of college basketball to react to that day. We talked a lot of Dan Hurley. We talked a lot of Cooper Flagg and Kansas and whatever. Cooper Flagg at Duke playing Kansas, of course. But North Carolina opened. Then on Saturday, the shocker, Gus Malzahn leaving Central Florida to take the Florida State head coaching job. I already told you, I think Ryan Day should call Central Florida and say, let me be your next head coach. Get me the heck out of Columbus. Purdue opened on Sunday. But the one I want to talk about, because I think it's an interesting job with some very interesting names. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about West Virginia, which after several years did fire Neil Brown, the head coach that has been there since, I believe, 2019. Let me pull it up real quick here. He had been at West Virginia since 2019. Went 6-6 this year, finished 37-35 overall. If you remember, we actually opened last season. We said Neil Brown was actually on a hotter seat than Jimbo Fisher. He was on the hottest seat coming into last year. He goes 9-4. But after a 6-6 season this year, ties for 8th in the Big 12. And oh, by the way, down the stretch, West Virginia was not good, losing 2 of its final 3 games, Baylor at home, and then also at Texas Tech to close the regular season. Neil Brown is fired. Now, listen, normally I wouldn't spend a ton of time on West Virginia. It's no disrespect. Great fan base, great state. I've spent time there. Beautiful people, beautiful state, whatever. But why I want to talk just for a minute about this job opening. There's actually some very interesting names that could open up as potential candidates for West Virginia with ties to West Virginia, either the state or the school. First of all, I can tell you that for 2 years, the rumor has been that Rich Rodriguez is trying to get back to West Virginia as the head coach, okay? And listen, this is one, I got a little bit of a soft spot for West Virginia and for Rich Rod. I've told you all a million times, I went to UConn. I referenced, by the way, throughout the season, been following Brian Kelly's career since he was at Cincinnati in the Big East football with UConn. And also, I was at UConn when West Virginia had those Steve Slayton, Pat White teams at West Virginia under Rich Rodriguez. Listen, there was a 14 playoff. If there was a 12-team playoff in 2007, I truly believe they would have won the national championship that year with Pat White, with Steve Slayton. They lose on the final day of the regular season to Pitt in the backyard brawl when that was still played as a conference game. And so you look at Rich Rod, he's kind of had a very interesting run since his time at West Virginia. Remember, this was a guy, he went to Michigan. We know it doesn't go well. He goes to Arizona. You can sit there and say that he wasn't very good at Arizona. Listen, he was at Arizona for 6 years. He had 5 winning seasons. He won 10 games one year, went to a Fiesta Bowl, played for a Pac-12 title, and won 8 games 3 times as head coach at Arizona, okay? So he's been good. And oh, by the way, remember, he's at Jacksonville State now, a small school that is in Conference USA. We actually had Rich Rod on the podcast about a year ago. And Jacksonville State last year went 9-4, made the school's first ever bowl game. And this year, they're 8-4 and playing for the Conference USA title right now. They have the number 3 rush offense in the country. They move the ball. Rich Rod still knows how to coach ball. And listen, I mean, listen, it goes without saying, I think he'd take it. I think it'd be fun for nostalgia. I don't think it's the craziest thing that West Virginia should or would call Rich Rod. So Rich Rod has to be at the top of the list. The other big name with very obvious West Virginia ties, you're going to laugh, but he does have West Virginia ties. It is none other than Mr. Buyout himself, Jimbo Fisher. So Jimbo Fisher is from West Virginia. And let me say this, okay? I'm just going to say something, and I don't know how controversial it's going to be. I don't feel like Jimbo Fisher would necessarily be the worst coach for West Virginia. Now, listen, do I think he's going to ever win another national championship? No. Do I think that thing was a little bit fluky? ACC was down. You had so much more talent than everybody else. Yeah. But here's a couple facts on Jimbo Fisher, okay? As recently as 2021, 3 seasons ago, the guy won 8 games in the SEC. So for like all the fact, like everyone's saying he's like totally incompetent. I don't believe he's totally incompetent. I don't think he's elite, especially when you put him in a conference with Nick Saban and Kirby Smart and all the good coaches in the SEC. Lane Kiffin kind of had his number the last few years, but he won 8 games 3 years ago in the SEC. You mean to tell me he can't win at West Virginia? It's no disrespect to West Virginia, but the Big 12 is an easier spot than the SEC is. Beyond that, criticize Jimbo for whatever. He's been able to recruit everywhere that he's gone. Number 1 classes at Florida State, obviously a number 1 class at Texas A&M. And so Texas A&M didn't make like this amazing improvement without him this year. They went 8-4 instead of 7-5. So it's not, he's so terrible. They won 1 more game without him against a much easier schedule. So I don't buy that he's terrible. He's going to be able to recruit. He's going to be able to raise funds. And I don't think raising funds is necessarily as important if we get this house settlement where the schools can pay players directly. But you're still going to need a collective for something. You're still going to need the collective to help broker. Like you're still going to need an NIL presence from the boosters. And that's what Jimbo Fisher does the best. And so I know it sounds crazy and I know everyone's going to make fun and he's the worst coach that's ever walked the face of the earth. I don't think Jimbo Fisher would be terrible at West Virginia if they make the call. Now, I'd call Rich Rod first. By the way, a couple other names that are worth noting with West Virginia. Barry Odom at UNLV. He obviously has ties to kind of, not really that part of the country, but more of the Midwest and eastern part of the country. Was at Missouri. Listen, remember, Barry Odom wasn't terrible at Missouri. Like it's easy to kind of oversell, what he did as the head coach of Missouri. But remember, this was a guy that in his 4 years at Missouri, 3 winning seasons, including an 8-5 year, he's been really good at UNLV. They're playing for a conference championship this weekend. They're 10-2 right now. And I've been told he's looking for a way out. I think it's kind of interesting because he's been kind of targeted as the potential next head coach at Arkansas. I can tell you for a fact, I think he thought that Sam Pittman was getting fired last year and that he was going to get the Arkansas job. That obviously did not happen. It does not change the fact that, in my opinion, he thought he was getting that job. And so because of it, I believe that he is looking for another head coaching job. And I think West Virginia would make sense for him. Obviously, the other big name, John Summerall, of course, at Tulane. He is kind of the belle of the ball right now. Everybody seems to want him. Has won 9 games as a first-year head coach at Tulane. Tulane is playing for an AAC title this weekend. Now, what's interesting about him, by the way, back-to-back 11 and 12 win seasons at Troy. What's interesting about John Summerall, pretty straightforward, is that what's pretty straightforward with John Summerall is I think he's going to have a lot of really good opportunities. Remember, this is the guy that some believe is the favorite for UNC. Obviously, I don't think Kentucky's getting rid of Mark Stoops because Mark Stoops said, I'm going to be back next year. But that is the guy that Kentucky fans have wanted for a long time. So I just bring it up because I think West Virginia is going to have better options than maybe a lot of people realize. By the way, there's, I think, even a report out that Andy Kolenicki, who's, of course, the offensive coordinator at Penn State, who has had a ton of success with that Penn State offense this year, that he could be a legitimate candidate there. So I just bring it up to say that I think West Virginia is actually going to have some pretty good options. And I'll tell you this, I think there's going to be some big names attached to that job too that are certainly very interesting. All right, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take one last quick break. When we come back, I'm just going to talk playoff. I just want to spend 10 minutes talking about what the playoff picture looks like, who is still alive, and who I believe has clinched spots, because I believe we're at a point where 11 of the 12 spots are basically spoken for. So we'll take a quick break, talk playoff, be right back. Before we do, many of you ask me all the time, Torres, what can I do to help support the show? You give me hours and hours and hours of content every single week. What can I do to help you? Well, I'll tell you what, do me a quick favor. Check out the Aaron Torres Media merchandise store for all of your team-specific shirts, hats, and more, all available at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. A lot of you wondering, Torres, what can I get in that merch store? Well, first of all, we got our brand new Hope and Pope Kentucky basketball t-shirts. That's right. Mark Pope has arrived. He is here to save the day. Get your Hope and Pope t-shirts there. Also, Arkansas fans, the Big Pig Invasion is here. You can get your tees there. Basketball School Alabama shirts. Mora Hurley 2024 UConn shirts for your tailgates at Rentschler Field, your games at the XL Center or Gamble. And oh, by the way, your Mike effing Woodson gear for Indiana. If you love football, we got you covered too. We got more Dion shirts and hats than we even know what to do with. The freeze warning has hit the plains. Auburn fans, grab your freeze warning tees now. And of course, our new era, new rules shirt applies to Nebraska football and its incredible fan base. We have more coming for the fall, plenty in stock right now. So make sure to check out the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. And you can always hit me up with any questions. Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. All right, everybody. I'm back. Gonna be back. Final segment of the show. So good to be back. A lot going on in the world of college football, okay? And by the way, throughout the week, we're going to have more college basketball coverage. There's a couple of really big games. Auburn at Duke, Kentucky at Clemson, UConn hosting Baylor, kind of needs a win there. So we're going to talk about all of that, but we're going to wrap the show with a little college football. By the way, on the West Virginia note, Paul, of course, notes the most notable of all West Virginia people with ties to West Virginia, none other than Nick Saban. So yeah, make that call, West Virginia. Let's see if you can get Nick Saban out of retirement. I don't think it's going to happen. But let's go ahead and wrap the show. And what I want to do now is just kind of talk big picture playoff, okay? Because like I said, listen, whether it was the Iron Bowl with Alabama, Auburn, Texas A&M, these games are interesting. But to me, they're interesting now in the context of the 12-team playoff. And I know a lot of people as college football fans don't like that. They don't like the fact that instead of spending 15 minutes just breaking down Alabama, Auburn, what does it mean? We're talking about it in the big picture of the playoff. But I do think Saturday was very important, and I want to spend just a few minutes on the playoff picture because there were some really important results. South Carolina beating Clemson matters for both teams. South Carolina is in the mix as a 3-loss SEC team. Clemson, I think, needs to win the ACC now. By the way, Clemson is in the ACC championship game because Miami lost. And so what I want to do is spend just a few minutes talking about all of the college football playoff possibilities, but really, I think we're pretty close to having 11 of the 12 teams pretty much set. And it is worth noting, by the way, that the 4 conference championship games are set as well. The SEC will be Georgia versus Texas. The Big Ten will be Penn State versus Oregon. The Big 12 will be Iowa State versus Arizona State, a 4-way tie. Colorado and BYU are left on the outside looking in. And in the ACC, as I said, with Miami losing to Syracuse, it now means that Miami is out. Clemson will play SMU. All right. So in terms of the 12-team playoff, let's get into who I think is in regardless. First of all, we have the 5 automatic bids, okay? Remember, 5 highest-rated conference champions are going to get in. And again, it is almost certain at this point. There was a thought, the AAC, if Tulane kept winning, could they get one of the bids? That's pretty much out of the question at this point. And so we have the 5 conference champions. The SEC champ is going to get in, whether it's Texas or Georgia. The Big Ten champ is going to get in, whether it's Oregon or Penn State. The ACC champ is going to get in, whether it's SMU or Clemson. The Big 12 champ is going to get in, whether it's Arizona State or Iowa State. And the Mountain West champ will almost certainly get in, whether it is UNLV or Boise. Obviously, we don't yet know the seedings. Only the first 4 highest-rated conference champions get first-round buys. Beyond those 5 teams, though, so those are 5 teams that are going to be in. Big 10 champ, SEC champ, ACC champ, Big 12 champ, Mountain West champ. In. Boom. Number 6 in terms of teams that I think are going to get in. Big 10 champ is going to get in. Or the Big 10 runner-up, is going to get in. Whether it's Penn State or Oregon, both teams are going to be in. And it's not because, we have to give the runner-up a spot in the college football playoff. I think both those teams have deserved it. Oregon is obviously the only undefeated team left in college football. I don't see there is no scenario where even if they lose this game by 100, they're going to get in, and they'll actually probably be the 5 seed if they get in. Penn State, I know they have the loss to Ohio State. I know that they would have a loss to Oregon, but Penn State is finished the regular season 11-1. We can criticize James Franklin. They took care of everybody on their schedule, and they are going to get into the playoff no matter what. So the number 6 team, in my opinion, that is in after the 5 conference champs is the Big Ten runner-up. The number 7 team that I believe is going to be in, regardless of what happens going into this weekend, I do think it's probably the SEC runner-up as well. Now, Texas, they're at 11-1. They're going to get in no matter what. Now, there will be an argument if Georgia loses in the SEC championship, they would be a 3-loss team. And my prediction, this is Torres' bold prediction, one of the talking points late Saturday of next week, if Georgia loses, there are going to be some that sit there and say, well, wait a second now. Ole Miss and Alabama will be out of the SEC SEC championship picture, but they will both have 3 losses as well. They also both have head-to-head wins over Georgia. And so there will be an argument, how can you put in Georgia with 3 losses over Alabama or Ole Miss that also have 3 losses, and Alabama and Ole Miss have head-to-head wins? Now, where I would counter is, one, the committee has said they will not punish teams for making the conference championship. If you were in before the conference championship, you're going to stay in. But 2, they're going to have that 10th win. And I have one more win. They're not going to be punished for playing a really good Texas team that they've already beaten. So regardless of what happens, I believe Georgia will be in as well, or Texas if they are the SEC runner-up. So that's 7 teams right there. 5 conference champs, Big Ten runner-up, SEC runner-up. Number 8, and I got to give them credit, they're better than I thought they were. Notre Dame Fighting Irish, okay? Notre Dame, to me, is a very impressive team, okay? Like we talked about it on the college football betting show. You understand that basically, statistically, they have not only a great defense, they have like one of the most underrated defenses that we've seen in a long time in college football, okay? They are currently, as we speak, number 2 in turnover margin. They are number 1 in total forced turnovers with 28. They are number 2 with 17 total interceptions, including 2 pick sixes against USC. Oh, by the way, number 1 pass defense in college football. Number 1 fewest yards allowed. Great defense. I actually think they're probably a little bit better than people think, but they're 11-1. The hay is in the barn. They have no conference championship. I think it's not out of the realm of possibility that depending on how things go this weekend, they could actually get that number 5 seed, which, as you've heard other people in college football media talk about, in some ways getting the 5 seed is maybe even better than getting the 4 seed. But I bring it up because I think Notre Dame is number 8. Again, along with the Big Ten. Let me say, Notre Dame is number 8. Number 9, another team that I believe has clinched an automatic bid or clinched an at-large bid already, even though they won't play next week. It is the Tennessee Volunteers, okay? Rocky Top, Tennessee, baby. And I'll tell you, they were concerned when there was all that quagmire with a bunch of 2-loss teams. But Ole Miss loses, Alabama loses. Obviously, when they lost to Georgia, I think there was some concern. Could we be on the outside looking in? Listen, they beat Vandy. They take care of business. They do what they have to do. They're 10-2. Obviously, look, a loss at Georgia isn't going to hurt them. I don't even think a loss at Arkansas, which is bowl eligible, is going to hurt them. So to me, Tennessee is the number 9 team that I have in. The 5 conference champs, the Big Ten runner-up, the SEC runner-up, Notre Dame, Tennessee. Those are my 9 so far. Number 10, a school that we've talked about plenty on today's Aaron Torres pod, that, of course, is the Ohio State Buckeyes. Listen, we can criticize Ryan Day. We can criticize them for losing to Michigan, and they should be criticized. It doesn't change the fact that they are 10-2, and they have 2 phenomenal wins at Penn State and also Indiana at home. We can make fun of Indiana. We can make fun of this. We can make fun of that. It does not change the fact that, remember, both those teams are going to be ranked in the top 10 going into the final week. Ohio State, even at 10-2, is not going to get left out of the playoff. Now, the conversation could be, should they get will they be one of the teams that hosts a playoff game or goes on the road? I've seen that as of right now, most projections have them on the road, ironically at Tennessee. That remains to be seen, but Ohio State is going to get in. The 11th team that I believe has clinched a college football playoff berth coming out of this weekend, it's the Indiana Hoosiers. And I know Coach Cignetti gets under so many people's skin. Okay, listen, I get it. I actually love him. I think he's awesome. I think he's fun. I think he's whatever. But he gets under a lot of people's skin. And I know what everyone's going to say. Indiana has no great wins. First off, we're not leaving out an 11-1 Big Ten team. We're just not doing it. The Big Ten has too much power, too much say, too much control. It's not going to happen. But here's my counter to Indiana not having great wins. Unlike Tennessee, unlike Ole Miss, unlike Alabama, unlike Ohio State, not only does Indiana have no bad losses, they basically destroyed everybody on their schedule. And like, to me, that does matter, right? You have no bad losses and you destroy everybody. Yeah, if there was a bunch of 11-1 or 10-2 at-large candidates, then yeah, Indiana might be on the outside looking in. But there aren't. And because of it, I think Indiana is at number 11. Now, really quickly, before we get out of here, I will just say very quickly, that 12th spot is going to be absolutely fascinating because I think there are a number of different teams that could have a legitimate argument for the final at-large spot going into the final week. First off, I think it's worth noting the ACC runner-up, if it is in fact SMU. SMU, remember, is 11-1 right now. They'd be 11-2. Their only other loss would be to a top 20 BYU team. But if SMU makes the ACC championship game and loses, I think they'd at least be in consideration. Now, it's kind of worth noting BYU has a head-to-head win, so BYU would kind of argue, why wouldn't we get in as a two-loss team? But I think SMU would have a legitimate gripe if they were left out. The counter to that, Clemson, because of the loss to South Carolina, I think they're out of the at-large conversation. I think the only way that Clemson can get into the playoff, they have to win the ACC championship game. We'll see if it happens, but that's the only way, in my opinion, that they get in. And then after that, you got a bunch of three-loss SEC teams. You got Alabama at 9-3. You got South Carolina at 9-3. You got Ole Miss at 9-3 as well. And I'll be honest, I don't know what the committee would possibly do there, because think about South Carolina. South Carolina is unquestionably the hottest team, not only out of those teams. South Carolina is one of the hottest teams in college football right now. I mean, they just beat Clemson. That's obviously a great win. We all know that. But on top of that, South Carolina, how about this? Over the final back half of the season, they have won 6 straight games. They just beat Clemson, beat Texas A&M, which of course should still be a top 25 win even after Texas A&M lost the other day. Their last loss was by 2 points against Alabama. I saw somebody bring this up on Twitter. I'd give them credit if I remembered who it was. But they said if the roles were reversed, if South Carolina had a head-to-head win over Alabama, but South Carolina took a bad loss late in the year like Alabama did, there is no way that Alabama would be left out on a 6-game win streak. So the point I'm trying to make, South Carolina is red hot, 6 straight wins. They're playing really well. Alabama and Ole Miss, of course, are 9-3 as well. They have some really high highs, including Georgia as a great win, but they have some bad losses as well. Obviously, Alabama has lost to Vandy and Oklahoma late in the year. And then, of course, Ole Miss lost to Kentucky, which was a very bad loss. I don't think LSU on the road is a terrible, terrible, terrible loss. And I don't think Florida is a terrible loss either, but I do think it will impact them going forward. Listen, I think it's a little early, but if I had to handicap it, I would sit there and say probably the order, Alabama's probably at the top. And I know people are going to get mad, but the truth is it's going to be hard to put in South Carolina with head-to-head losses over Ole Miss and Alabama. Just something to monitor going forward. I'll tell you what, my computer's about to die because apparently it's not plugged in. So I better get out of here before my computer dies while we're live on air. If you're not subscribed to the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast, please make sure to do so. Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Music, wherever you get your podcasts, please make sure to subscribe. Also, make sure to rate and review the show. Go ahead, give us a quick 5 stars. Let us know what you like, what you don't like, all that good stuff. Make sure you're following on social media at Aaron_Torres on Twitter, at Aaron Torres Pod on Instagram, Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com, Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. Appreciate everybody's support. Again, we'll get back to some basketball throughout the week, but today we had to lock in on college football, and we will have full conference championship previews, Ryan Day stuff all week. Yeah, it's going to be awesome. Appreciate everybody's support. Talk to you soon. Until then, I got to go. Shout out to Torrent Craig. Shout out to Rachel, who hates my voice. Shout out to JJ Reddick, you F-head. Unblock me, bro. I'll be back.